Today, we will together listen to and analyze a case that has spanned over 3 decades with questions that remain unanswered. Bryan in Texas. A respected high school principal, a devoted husband, suddenly became a suspect in his wife's murder in a case that continues to spark debate across America to this day. We will rely on investigative articles from ProPublica, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Texas Monthly, and many other sources to recount this story. This is not just a criminal case. It is also a mirror reflecting the deadly flaws in America's justice system and forensic science. Clifton, Texas in 1985, a small town with a population of fewer than 3,500 people. Bryan, the principal of Boss County High School, was a tall man with a warm voice, always finding ways to make students feel cared for. His wife, Mickey Bryan, was a fourth-grade teacher. On the morning of October 15th, 1985, Mickey was found dead in their bedroom, shot 4 times with a .357 revolver, the gun the couple kept to ward off snakes at their ranch. Joe, who was attending a principal's conference in Austin, 120 miles away, returned home to devastating news. His wife was dead, and he was the prime suspect. The New York Times Magazine in 2018 described the scene. Joe, dressed in a neat suit, collapsed beside his wife's body, sobbing. Who did this to Mickey? The police believed Joe had driven from Austin to Clifton in the middle of the night, killed his wife, and then returned to the conference as if nothing had happened. The motive? Prosecutors claimed Joe wanted to collect Mickey's life insurance money despite no evidence showing he was in financial trouble. From the outset, the case was driven more by baseless suspicion than by evidence. According to Texas Monthly, murders were rare in Clifton, so the pressure to solve the case quickly was immense. Joe, with his prominent position in the community, became an easy target, but there were no witnesses, no fingerprints, no direct DNA evidence. Joe's car had no blood, and the clothes he wore at the conference were clean. So why did the police still target him? Was it because they needed a culprit to appease public outcry? In 1986, Joe was brought to trial. The pivotal evidence that led to his conviction? Something called bloodstain matter analysis, conducted by Detective Robert Thorman. Thorman stood before the jury, declaring with absolute confidence, the bloodstains on the bed, on the walls, and in the bathroom indicated that Joe had shot Mickey at close range, changed clothes in the bathroom, and then left the scene. ProPublica conducted a thorough investigation and discovered that bloodstain analysis at the time was nearly junk science claims, theories, or conclusions that appear to be based on science but are actually flawed, unverified, unreliable, or manipulated to serve a personal, political, or legal purpose. Thorman had only undergone a 1-week training course, yet he was deemed an expert in the courtroom. By 2018, Thorman himself wrote in an affidavit, "My conclusions were wrong. Some of the techniques I used lacked a scientific basis." The Texas Forensic Science Commission also confirmed Thorman's analysis was inaccurate, opaque, and unacceptable. Another piece of evidence that led to Joe's conviction was a blood-stained flashlight found in the trunk of his car. Prosecutors claimed the blood on the flashlight matched Mickey's, suggesting Joe used it to light his way during the crime. But The Intercept in 2019 pointed out that the flashlight was highly suspicious. It was found by Charlie Blue, Mickey's brother, 4 days after the murder, in a trunk that Blue himself had borrowed from Joe. Why did such a critical piece of evidence surface so late, and why did DNA tests on the flashlight in 2012 and 2018 yield inconclusive results, unable to determine whose blood it was? Furthermore, ProPublica uncovered that prosecutors had deliberately concealed a lab report indicating that the blood on the flashlight might not belong to Mickey. This was a serious violation of professional ethics, yet no one was held accountable. Joe Bryan's case is a heartbreaking example of the justice system placing blind faith in unverified science. Bloodstain analysis was once heralded as truth, but is now criticized for lacking objectivity, being easily manipulated, and relying too heavily on the personal experience of the expert. The flashlight, with questions surrounding its origin and DNA testing, further raises the question, was this a case constructed to frame Joe? While Joe was convicted, another name emerged but was quickly forgotten: Dennis Dunlap, a former Clifton police officer. According to ProPublica and Texas Monthly, Dunlap was a suspect in the murder of Judy Whitley, a high school student just 4 months before Mickey's case. He had been arrested for sexual assault, had a history of violence, and even boasted to friends about being with the teacher on the night Mickey was killed. But the police did not thoroughly investigate Dunlap, and he took his secrets to the grave when he died in 1996. The New York Times in 2018 asked, why wasn't Dunlap investigated more thoroughly? Were the police too focused on Joe? Or was there something in Clifton they didn't want to uncover? Some sources from Texas Monthly even suggested that Dunlap had close ties to powerful figures in the town, which may have influenced the investigation. Moreover, The Intercept pointed out that there were witnesses who heard Dunlap discuss Mickey's case with details only the killer would know. But these statements were dismissed by prosecutors as unsubstantiated. Meanwhile, Joe, a man with no criminal record, was convicted based on flawed scientific evidence and a questionable flashlight. Dunlap's emergence complicates the case but also exposes a sad reality. The justice system sometimes chooses a suspect who is easier to handle rather than pursuing the truth. If Dunlap was indeed the killer, failing to investigate him not only wronged Joe, but also allowed a dangerous individual to remain free for a decade. This raises questions about the responsibility of police and prosecutors in upholding justice. In 2018, Joe Bryan's case was revived thanks to an outstanding investigation by ProPublica and the New York Times Magazine, led by reporter Pamela Koloff. Koloff not only exposed errors in the bloodstain analysis, but also delved into contradictions in the statements of prosecutors and police. Her article, over 20,000 words long, is considered one of the finest pieces of investigative journalism on wrongful convictions in America. Koloff's investigation captured national attention. Novelist John Grisham, famous for legal thrillers like The Firm and A Time to Kill, read the article and was immediately captivated. He wrote a letter in support of Joe, calling the case a disgrace to justice, and drew inspiration from it for his book, The Guardian's 2019. Grisham even appeared on talk shows urging the public to pay attention to Joe's plight. But despite the support of the media and a celebrity, Joe's path to freedom was fraught with obstacles. From 2007 to 2019, he was rejected 7 times by the Texas Board of Pardons, with the reason that he remained a threat to society. Despite Joe, then nearly 80 years old, suffering from heart failure and having an exemplary prison record. The Washington Post in 2020 described Joe's frustration: "I don't understand why they won't give me a chance. I just want to go home to my family." In March 2020, after an 8th review, Joe was finally paroled, walking out of Huntsville prison at the age of 80. ProPublica captured the moment. Joe, frail in his prison uniform, raised his hands to thank God, sobbing, "Thank you, Lord, for watching over me." But his freedom was only temporary. Joe remained under a life sentence, never exonerated or granted a retrial. The role of journalism, particularly ProPublica in this case, is undeniable. They not only brought the truth to light, but also put pressure on the justice system. However, the fact that Joe was only paroled and not granted a retrial highlights the rigidity of Texas law. According to the New York Times, for a retrial, Joe had to prove that the jury would not have convicted him if they had known about the errors in the bloodstain analysis, a legal barrier that is nearly impossible to overcome. This raises the question, does the justice system truly want to correct wrongs, or does it merely seek to protect the reputation of prosecutors and judges? Joe Bryan passed away in October 2024 at the age of 84 from pancreatic cancer, according to the Washington Post and the New York Times. He died in the arms of his family but was never exonerated. His lawyers, along with the Innocence Project of Texas, had planned to appeal to federal court, but Joe's death ended all hope. Joe's case is also a wake-up call. The Intercept wrote that hundreds of others in the U.S. may be wrongfully convicted due to outdated forensic techniques such as bloodstain analysis, bite mark analysis, or hair identification. Furthermore, the resistance of Bosque County prosecutor Adam Sibley to allow additional DNA testing on the flashlight reveals a grim reality. Sometimes protecting old convictions is more important than seeking the truth. A major lesson is the role of the media. Without Pamela Koloff and ProPublica, Joe might still be in prison and his story would have been forgotten. Additionally, Texas Monthly suggests that the public must demand greater transparency from prosecutors and police to ensure no one is convicted based on false evidence. What do you think about this case? Was Joe Bryan truly innocent? Was Dennis Dunlap the real killer? And how can we prevent similar mistakes from happening? Please share your thoughts with me. Don't forget to press subscribe, like, and share this podcast episode. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode.